the Jewish Channel's Week in Review. How ultra-Orthodox influence is shifting policy in Israel's new government, and how Israeli expatriates are faring here in the U.S. It's the Jewish news that's changing your world right now in this episode of the Week in Review. Hello, and welcome to the Jewish Channel's Week in Review. I'm Stephen I. Weiss. The influence of the ultra-Orthodox parties in Israel's new government continued to be felt this week as the question of who is Jewish was put forward in new ways. The new religious services minister, David Azulai of the ultra-Orthodox Shas party, told Israel's Army Radio on Tuesday, quote, "A reformed Jew, from the moment he stops following Jewish law, I cannot allow myself to say that he is a Jew." The idea that someone could stop being Jewish because of the way they behave runs counter to most accepted notions of Judaism throughout history. Azulai's comments follow on remarks just a few weeks ago in which he reportedly called the reform movement a disaster for the state of Israel and spoke ill of women holding prayer services at the Western Wall. Tuesday's comments drew a quick response from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who said, quote, "I have spoken with Minister Azulai to remind him that Israel is a home for all Jews and that as Minister of Religious Affairs, he serves all of Israel's citizens." But while rhetoric about who is a Jew flies in various directions, actual legislation on who may be considered Jewish in Israel is taking a distinct tack under the new Israeli government, whereas the previous government had sought to decentralize authority on conversions from the ultra-Orthodox office of the chief rabbinate into dozens of regional rabbinical courts. The Israeli cabinet reversed that move on Sunday. This means that many thousands of Jews who'd have had little problem being recognized by the somewhat more liberal regional rabbinical courts will have to prove their adherence to an ultra-Orthodox standard if they wish to be married in Israel, have their children recognized as Jewish and attend Jewish schools, and obtain other rights and privileges. And in yet another measure, the cabinet has voted to transfer authority over Israel's rabbinical courts from the Justice Ministry, where it has been and where the minister is a non-ultra-Orthodox woman, to the Religious Services Ministry, where the ultra-Orthodox Azulai is the minister. But on the topic of Israeli politics outside the Jewish state, candidate for the Democratic presidential nomination Hillary Rodham Clinton drew attention with a letter to major donor Chaim Saban, in which Clinton opposed the so-called boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, or BDS. In the letter, Clinton expressed, quote, alarm over BDS and said, "I know you agree that we need to make countering BDS a priority. I remain convinced that Israel's long-term security and future as a Jewish state depends on having two states for two peoples, but that outcome can only be achieved through direct negotiations between Israelis and Palestinians. It cannot be imposed from the outside or by unilateral actions." Saban has reportedly given $2 million to Clinton's super PAC. Moving on, as Israeli expatriates continue to seek ways to integrate into the American Jewish community, one organization is pushing them to develop an entrepreneurial approach modeled after a leading TV show. Rebecca Honig-Friedman reports.
At a recent conference for Israeli community leaders in the New York metro area, attendees had a chance to pitch their programming ideas in a Shark Tank-style competition. The winning prize, $5,000 in funding, and mentorship from the group that ran the conference, Moatza Mekomit New York, the umbrella organization for the Israeli community in the New York area.
We're a community of Israelis that live here, reside here, left Israel for whatever reasons, for however amount of time, and we really would like to nurture and maintain that Israeli community.
Community building pitches ranged the gamut from a birthright-inspired series of weekend retreats for Israeli-American teenagers to enhance their Israeli and Jewish identities, staging a play about the challenges of dating as an Israeli in America.
No way, you Israeli? Yeah. I can't believe it. Casey, wow, nice.
A Hebrew language parenting support group, Hebrew language sex education workshops, and more. But among these Hebrew-heavy pitches, the winning idea was a dual-language animated web series called Kafe Date, or Playdate in English, a project of the Yeladudas Children's Theater Company.
We want to bring Israeli kids and American Jewish kids sit together, even if the Israeli kids do not understand a word in English and the American kids do not understand a single word in Hebrew. They can sit together and enjoy the same theatrical experience.
That desire to bridge the gap between the Israeli-American and Jewish-American communities was a recurring theme of the three-day conference, which was held at the JCC in Manhattan.
We live here in America, and I think we can't be close just in the Israeli community. We have to bridge, and we will be much stronger as one group.
We're away from our family. And, you know, the Jewish community becomes our expanded family, our family here home away from home.
Yet it's a second home in which many Israeli Americans do not always feel completely comfortable or welcome.
We have different mentality. We were growing up in a different culture, and this is where it comes from. However, now that the Israeli community is getting bigger and bigger in the States, this is a beautiful opportunity for us to serve as a bridge.
That subject was addressed at one of the few conference forums conducted in English, where American Jewish communal leaders said American Jews need to do more to bridge the gap.
I don't think the American Jewish community as a community has really yet shown an understanding for the unique experience of people who are here for an indefinite period of time with some idea of going back home, of being here, but there may be guilt in not being back home. And I think our understanding of that needs to be better.
Panelists also spoke of the importance for American Jews of bringing Israelis into the fold.
The American Jewish community is not strong enough, and the knowledge and commitment and strength that the Israeli community brings when it's here in America is something that we need to link to as well.
For more on the Moatzah Mekomit New York Leadership Conference, watch the full broadcast version of the Week in Review. From the JCC in Manhattan for the Jewish Channel, I'm Rebecca Honig-Friedman.
Thank you, Rebecca. Finally, this week on Up Close, religions and beliefs don't exist in a vacuum, and they change over time as influences go back and forth. The yoga tradition is presented popularly as ancient wisdom in classes around America today, but most of what's being taught is less than 100 years old. The woman largely responsible for making your yoga class what it is, and as popular as it is the subject of the nation's senior contributing writer Michelle Goldberg's The Goddess Pose, The Audacious Life of Indra Devi, the woman who helped bring yoga to the West. And with the mix of religions here in the United States, it can sometimes feel like we're building a distinctly American religion. One way that manifests is with those who belong to multiple religions at once. Susan Katz-Miller discusses that journey in Being Both, Embracing Two Religions in One Interfaith Family. Here are some of the highlights from my interview with Susan Katz-Miller. We know that a lot of people are intermarried in America, whether between religions or between denominations. And we know that that happens a lot in the Jewish community. But our general perception is, and this is the way the vast majority of people who are in interfaith marriages end up, is that they end up fundamentally going one way or the other, and it's a binary. But you're in a community, and you found several communities where there's actually this effort to bind the two religions together. How'd that come about?
Well, first of all, it's a substantial number of people doing this now. The Pew Research big study on the Jewish American landscape that came out in 2013 found about a quarter of all intermarried Jewish parents bringing up their children partly Jewish and partly something else, which in most cases that means they're honoring both religions in the family and giving their kids an interfaith education, which is the way that we think about it. So it's not this marginal, crazy idea to try to do both anymore, even though a lot of religious institutions, a lot of clergy will still urge families to choose one.
One of the messages that comes through very consistently as you speak to these different communities is that if you're going to be involving your children in a discussion about two religions, you almost need to be more prepared on both religions than you would be if you were going to stick with one. For your community and for a bunch of these communities, there's probably some hundreds of families, maybe even a couple thousand families, who are attending services that are interfaith services every single week almost.
If you have one common religion that you share, it can go in many directions. You could become a deeply practicing family with that unified religion. But a lot of people, it's their default religion and they take it for granted, and so they don't necessarily desire to spend that kind of time and effort on it for whatever reason.
It's a fascinating thing to say. We are going to have a discussion about there being clear lines between Christianity and Judaism, and therefore many would say Christians and Jews. And you're saying you children are both, and you're going to be both. What does it mean to embody difference?
I think it's often really hard for people who were born and raised in a single faith context to kind of get this on a gut level, that those of us born into interfaith families grow up feeling that this is normal because it's who we are. And we grow up with our family on both sides being important to us. And so from the very beginning, we're integrating. And it's the parallels, the metaphors are not inappropriate. I don't think very many people would, agree with every single position of one Democrat just because you're a Democrat. No two people share all their beliefs and all their practices, even if they share a label. What we teach our kids in these interfaith programs is that you can't assume what anybody thinks or believes based on their label.
You can see the full episode of Up Close on the Jewish channel on cable. You can also listen to the full audio of Up Close as a podcast available on iTunes or in your favorite podcast player. That's all for this week. From all of us here at the Jewish channel, be well. The Jewish channel is available on cable. Time Warner Cable Channel 1640, IOPTM Channel 505, RCN Channel 268, Cox Cable Channel 1, Bright House Channel 330, Verizon Fios Channel 900, and on Comcast and the on-demand menu on premium channels. For more information, visit tjctv.com.